teach at the College of DuPage, and at the College of DuPage, I teach in the adult ed department for ELA, but I also teach in the Adjunct Faculty Institute. And so in that area, I teach an Intro to College teaching course and also teaching for social justice, equity, and inclusion, and diversity in the classroom. So I'm very passionate about these subjects, about education, and it's been my life's work, and I am looking forward to keep growing and learning as we go. So this slide has my email address on it. So, you know, when you go back, if you ever want to contact me, feel free. I look forward to hearing from you. And I went to switch to the next slide and it's not working. Sarah, am I not the host anymore?
No, click on it and then try again.
Oh, here we go. Thanks.
I've done that before. So I've made that mistake several times before. So it's helpful because now I know.
So I did want to start actually, you know, kind of to Sarah's point, I really like the interaction. It's definitely my style. So I wanted to ask to start out, I put a few of my thoughts in this first slide, but I wanted to ask, what are some of the ways that you see a breakdown in communication and teaching virtually? So if you can put it in the chat, we can have our moderator share some of the things that have come up.
One of the ways I'm seeing, Tara, is that just that people are anxious about technology, that they're afraid of technology, or that they think that they're not, you know, they're not capable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I've seen a lot of that as well. And everyone's at different levels in terms of their anxiety and their confidence with the technology, definitely. Other thoughts?
So there's two comments. Karen says spontaneous interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And Tara says students who have low digital skills or lack of technology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then there's another one here. Harder for students to talk with each other overall. Speaking and listening can be compromised by the limits of technology.
I agree. Not just the, you know, the discomfort of being on the computer, but also, you know, the glitching or the delay, or, you know, it really makes a difference in our communication. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing some of your thoughts for that. And again, you can see some of the thoughts that I put down here just to start. But I'm going to move on to talking about, I included here at the bottom, found this great article just to kind of springboard some ideas when I was looking into this. And some of it comes from some stories and solutions that were shared here from instructors all over. And one spoke about polling students regularly. So not just checking in at the beginning. What are you comfortable with? What kind of computer do you have? I think most of our programs have a way of polling students for what they have in terms of technology and how they feel about technology, and explaining the different kinds of courses that are being offered and what that entails with technology. But also to keep going, you know, think about, are you asking your students that type of question regularly? You know, sometimes when we get started in the class, of course we want to focus on the content. But also things can come up, you know, throughout the class in terms of, are you still comfortable with the technology that we're using? Are you able to submit your assignments easily? So I was trying to think of some ways, and we all love leaving these sessions with something that we can use. So there's a Google form in here, and I hope this works and I can easily go back to my presentation, but, oh, I already had it up. Anyway, so feel free to use this. I made a special one for the forum, but I think it's best if you use this, if you make a copy for yourself. Otherwise, it could all be in the clouds and we'll be sharing it together or something. But, you know, I always like to tell my students why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I just put a little blurb here about, you know, wanting to check in with them and, why I'm giving them this special poll here, but I just did a Google form. A lot of times it's easy for them to use this on their phones, you know, if they're kind of on the go. So I like using Google form for that reason. So I just included a couple of questions, you know, that you can do with your students. Have you been able to access all the materials? Answer with a yes or no, but also explain. So I changed that one to short answer. You know, I don't know about the rest of you, but even I'm using Canvas right now and I love it. There's a user-friendly app. I love how I can copy things from class to class and share them with other teachers. But all of a sudden last week, my student said, there's no submit button for the homework. And I'm like, I made it just like every other assignment that I made. How, you know, and some of them feel more comfortable telling me that than others. So I feel like if I would have had, you know, given them this poll last week, which I just started, I might have found out about that sooner actually. So does it feel routine now? Are you spending extra time figuring out logins? Is there anything else I should know that may help you? So just to kind of end with an open-ended question. So feel free to use this or change it or download it and adapt it for yourself. Because I really like that idea. Whoops. Ah. The next point is asking family members. You know, sometimes people that were close to our family and friends may be more likely to share anxiety, about classes or what they're experiencing. And so this reminds me of one of the classes that I teach, a discussion board in my intro to college teaching class, when we're going over some best teaching practices. It's always so valuable to the discussion board when people share experiences that their kids are having in college. I like this idea because my kid did something like this, or when we're comparing, you know, mission statements, sometimes someone will throw in something that their child experienced at that school, and it just makes it so much more valuable. So if we talk to, you know, family and friends, kids, adults who are learning virtually, what's working, what's not, what's working for adults, what do you find valuable, any of those kinds of things, I think that's such a great idea. So I've been trying to make more of an effort to reach out to kind of get ideas and feedback from people in other places, you know, not just within my bubble of my school and my colleagues. And then another story that I had read about was just looking at the difference between, you know, being fair and but considering sameness. Like, where is everyone coming from? It's not always the same. If you provide the same opportunity, you know, a fair opportunity for what you think is fair, opportunity for people to submit work or interact with you, you know, but people aren't always coming from the same place. So the more we can do about getting to know our students and seeing where they're coming from to be able to reach them. And we'll keep going with some more ideas for that. Are there any questions or comments so far?
Hey, Tara, I'm just going to mention, I actually wrote it down whenever Dr. Luke Wood said it this morning about be relational, and you were just making that point, and that research basically has shown how valuable connections are. So I just want to give a shout out to what you just shared because, you know, it is super important.
Thank you. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to go back and forth a little bit here because we kind of started talking about this before, but then I'm going to talk about it more in this slide too. So this is a second slide about breaking down communication barriers, and I just kind of kept going with some more solutions and tips. So in my last presentation I was in, I thought that was great. They were talking about WhatsApp and different ways that we can communicate with our students. And I have found that using Google Voice over the last few months has been amazing. I've been able to communicate with my students so easily. So what I did is I already have a Gmail, you know, and a lot of us have some kind of Google account. If you don't, make a Google account. And then one of the apps is a Google Voice. So I set up a Google Voice account and I go to my Google contacts and I put all my students and their phone numbers in there. And I typically ask them, hey, I'll probably communicate with you via text. Is that okay? It's a Google Voice number. I prefer to use Google Voice because I only use it for school. So I just let them know that, you know, and some people would prefer to use a different number anyway, so that's a bonus, but I use it only for teaching so that I know if I get a Google Voice notification that it's one of my students, I need to look at it and try to get back to them as soon as I can, or see what they need to see how long it'll take me to get them their information or whatever. And it's been so great. I can also open a Google Voice tab on my computer, or I can do it on my phone. So a lot of times when I'm doing grades, you know, my read works for the week, for example, I'll go through and maybe there's one or two people, hey, is everything okay? Are you able to access it? This morning I had one of my students text me, hey, I passed my language arts and it was awesome. And I could very quickly text back and forth with her. And I know that I got that through Google Voice. It doesn't get buried in a bunch of texts about carpooling to soccer or whatever it might be, you know? So I think I, whoopsie, blacked out or stamped out all their names and numbers. I did the best I could, but I just wanted you to see, like, this is just the kind of thing I'm able to do with Google Voice. So one day, this student was sharing results with me that I needed because I was going to try to differentiate what I was doing the next week with their grammar. And so I just told my students, some of them sent their results via Canvas, but I said, if that's being funny, just take a picture of the paper and I can go through. Happy Sunday, please don't forget the discussion board. And it's just made a world of difference in terms of how I communicate with my students. So, excuse me, I'll take a sip of water. In Google Voice, I also give them labels. So I'll have my language arts AM, language arts PM. So when it comes up, I can automatically, oh yeah, okay, I gotta go to this group of papers. And it's just been so great. So if you have any questions about how to use that, I highly, highly recommend it. And it's made a world of difference with communicating with my students. And of course, we need to consider our students that are at a greater risk of disengagement. So, you know, again, with getting to know our students and the obstacles that they're dealing with in terms of family obligations, technology, communication, there are so many programs available at our schools and with our communities to try to get them the technological capability. But even with that, people need Wi-Fi hotspots and such. So we really need to try to get to know that as best as we can. Being flexible and adaptable. You know, I think some of these tools like Google Voice, I should be a Google Voice spokesperson right now, but you know, with that Canvas issue that I was having with the assignment the other day, I was able to, you know, remind people real quickly, hey, my email is on the first page of Canvas, but here it is in case you're out and about, if you want to just email me that assignment instead. You know, just being able to be flexible with them has really helped. And I love this next point, re-envision this for yourself, an opportunity for fun. So it's just like, I remember this great advice from when I was first starting to teach a long time ago, an interview, and I was getting my portfolio all ready. And in one of the classes, one of my professors said, just think of it as an opportunity for fun, to get to talk to someone and tell them about how much you're enjoying your teaching. And I was like, okay, whatever. But then I went to my first interview and it was kind of like I tricked myself, you know, like, wait a minute, I can do this. This is going to be fun. And even though I'm scared of it, you know, I think of technology sometimes like that. It's a little scary, but it is, you know, it's an opportunity for fun for us and for our students. So I think to kind of look at it through that lens is beneficial. So I can think of one example that I'm going to try for this. I think for one of the next classes I'm going to teach, we have to use Burlington English, but Burlington English has awesome ways, you know, we can communicate for calendars and reminders and everything, but some teachers also use it with Google Classroom or Weebly. I had great luck with Weebly in the spring when we weren't able to log everyone onto a learning management system or anything. But I was talking with another instructor this morning and she uses Google Classroom. I'm like, you know what? I saw a training about Bitmoji classrooms in Google, and I just kind of want to see what that looks like with adult ed. So that's my next plan for a little fun. So I was going to stop and ask, what fun have you had? What have you encouraged yourself to do that you either tricked yourself into being fun or something that you're looking forward to trying to re-envision some things that you do? Do share.
Tara, one of the things that I've heard from some teachers that they've been using is choice boards, where they start out that there are multiple. So in-person classes, we might have had people where they came in and they could do this assignment, that assignment, or a different way, multiple ways of action and expression. So, but we can do that virtually also, like providing, maybe you're going to go and listen to this video, or you
Yes.
can read this article. You know, you had an article for us at the beginning that outlined something that we could go. So giving students choices is something that I've heard from teachers that they're doing to kind of put some fun into this virtual learning.
That's awesome. That's a great idea. And I do think that that's something that's not new, but just something that we're seeing a lot more of because of our situation. And I think that's a great example of, you know, re-envisioning things and, you know, an opportunity for fun or something different. So absolutely. So the next point, Beauty and the Beast. This is, I saw a really good presentation a few years ago. And so this was a director of a program, and she had two students who had taken online courses, and she called one Beauty and one the Beast. And her presentation was about differences between these courses and what made one the Beauty and one the Beast. And something that came out for the Beast, unfortunately, was that this student was spending so much more time, cognitive energy is how they put it. And this has always stuck with me. Cognitive energy on the buttons and where to send things, and things were always changing. You know, it's important to be flexible, but routine is good too. You know, so the student was spending so much more cognitive energy on the nuts and bolts of how to access material and turn things in and what the expectations were than she was on the actual content. So I think that's really something when we take a step back and look at what we're doing. And when we're talking to students too, I think that's a really valuable idea to keep in mind. So it's always something that stuck with me. So I thought that it would be good to share here. So, and kind of on that note, there is so much great technology. We have so many options available to us, but if the students can't use it easily, it probably won't happen. So. All right, in the next portion, and it's really nice that, Sarah, that you had shared the idea of the choice board and providing choices for instruction. And I was talking with Sarah the other night about this too, about universal design for learning, and that it's just such a great lens to look through for this idea of equity, looking at our virtual teaching through that lens, because we can really look at all these different aspects kind of in one place and work really hard to reach all of our students and allow opportunities for all students, all different types of students to learn. So in this design is based on evidence of how people learn and what people need. And so it's both for teachers and for learners. So let's take a look, and I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. Some of you are probably more familiar than others, and we could do a whole presentation plus a forum about UDL, but just for our purposes, I just want you to have a couple of minutes to look at this chart that represents universal design for learning guidelines. we'll do about 20 more seconds. So what I did here in the next few slides is I broke them up in terms of these columns. So I started with some ideas about engagement, some ideas about representation, and some ideas about action and expression. Well, again, these choice boards, I love how that keeps coming up now in providing choices for our students, engaging the learner. So one thing that I can think of that we don't always think through, I don't think, through the lens of equity. It just sounds like something so simple, but it really is making just that assignment more equitable for various reasons. Is I teach GED, language arts, and giving students a choice about what they're going to write about can make a huge difference. So I did 2 warm-ups or 2 reasoning through language arts writing examples before my students just took their GED ready. And one, I had the assignment chosen already, and then I just kind of wanted to see how it went, the topic that is. And it went great, but you know, I had another student who was a little bit quiet and hesitant to speak up, but he had already taken a language arts course and done a lot of the prompts. And for the second one, he finally did speak up, and I was, you know, I gave him something different, but then I thought to myself, I should give a choice. You know, we all know they don't want our opinion, so that's not why we're giving them a choice. But again, just to work with different material can sometimes make a difference for our students. So in ESL, ELA, ESL classes, giving them different topics to choose from. I had a student who had some awesome ideas for teaching ELA in using, for conversation writing and reading, an Amazon project. It was awesome, choosing products to talk about. So as much choice as they can have, he had a special rubric set up. I just think that's a really good idea for reaching all learners. So I think I coined a term here, over visible. Is that a thing, you think? If not, it is now. We're coining that term. Making our goals and objectives over visible. So this could be one benefit of teaching virtually, that we're using all this technology to reach our students, that we can have our deadlines, our objectives, our goals. It's always beneficial in my experience to share our rationale and our objectives for what it is that we're doing in class. And technology could give us many opportunities to do so. Or when we're back in the classroom, I think some of these pieces of technology that we're using, we can keep using for those reasons. To blast out reminders, have it posted on our schedules, have it posted on the top of our screen. It can only help to reach the students and to have them more engaged in what we're doing. Collaborating with students, I think most people were talking about doing breakout rooms, so I think that's something that a lot of people are using in their classes. I think in an asynchronous format, obviously the breakout rooms aren't something that are going to apply, but at the same time, the continued use of discussion board or blogs in the classroom gives an opportunity for that collaboration for students, especially if you have set guidelines for when students have to post. Like right now I have, please post an initial response to our discussion board by Thursday. And then by Monday, please post 2 responses to your classmates' posts with more than good point for classes.
Hey, Tara.
Yeah.
There was a comment by Rebecca that she noticed in the self-regulation box that she saw something that Dr. Wood mentioned this morning, which was holding high expectations allows students to rise to the expectation and promote motivation.
Yes, Absolutely. I agree. So just like to go along with posting expectations and everything.
Yes.
Yes, awesome. Yes, great connection to kind of making our forum whole and making connections to what we heard this morning. And I completely agree. I think that's a great point and a good aspect to add. So that's great. And self-reflection is also really important for students. So I'm really looking forward in one of my classes, like I just said, my one class took their GED Ready the other day. And so I don't think that I've ever had a formal reflection as a part of that, but it's something that I do in a lot of my other classes. And I thought, why am I not doing that? So for one of their assignments this week, I have them doing some self-reflection within Canvas. And I just think it's a great tool to use for them to have a self-reflection, and it'll allow some feedback for me. And I told them that too, but also it's really important for them to self-reflect and use it for goal setting and such. A Google form, kind of like the checking in that I posted, is a great idea. And then using exit tickets. So especially as your students get used to using Zoom or wherever it is that you meet, or even if it's asynchronous, when they're done with the week or the session, you can shoot them a Google form or a poll even to use as an exit ticket, depending on what it is that you're looking for. So great ways to engage students. So representation, and you can see how obviously there's a lot of, cross-referencing, and some things will be used for many different purposes within our chart. But, and we were talking about this earlier today too, using descriptions with visuals is so important for students, especially as we're teaching virtually. Just having a blurb at the bottom or sending something in a Google slide to use along with some of the visuals that you're doing, having a written description with visuals can make a huge difference for some students, especially when making connections to the material. Sometimes with that description, it really helps that connection to be made. So, and then the closed captioning. What do you think about the closed captioning that we're using now?
Tara, could you tell them how you're getting the closed captioning? Because everybody has access to this.
Oh, sure. You mean, so how I turned it on?
Well, just making sure they understand that you're presenting in Google Slides, and that, yeah, it's a part of Google Slides, and because I'm not sure that everybody realizes that they also can do this.
Oh, okay. Absolutely. So in Google Slides, when I hit present, on the bottom, you see this? Everyone can see this, right? When I do that on my screen, or no?
Yes.
Okay, at the bottom, there's this closed captioning here. So I just turned that on. And then here I can either put the text position at the top or bottom, but a lot of times our toolbars are on the bottom when we're using Zoom or whatever it is that you're using. So we put it on the top. So another thing, like some different ways that I've used closed captioning. So at the College of DuPage, we have an awesome tool that maybe someone on here can think of the name of. It starts with a Z or a Y, I think. I will look it up or think of it. But we have an awesome tool that we can use to load our presentations that we're doing, and then it'll close caption them. But if we go back through, like I did a recording for one of my classes, we split up the chapters of the Teaching for Diversity and Social Justice book that we use. And in my summer class, there weren't quite enough students. So I did one of the presentations. So I made my presentation, I recorded it, and then I put it into this system that we have, and it made the closed captioning, but then I could go through and edit it. So if it misheard one of the words I said, or I had referenced an outside resource and I think it got the name of the author a little bit wrong, so I went through and I edited it, and then I could post it to Blackboard. Some of the other things teachers are using is YouTube has a closed captioning option. So I've recorded on my computer using my QuickTime player and then loaded it to YouTube, turned on the closed captioning, and then posted it. So that's something that might be a little bit more widely available. So closed captioning is so important. I've come to appreciate it even in watching movies and all sorts of things, but our students seem to always appreciate it, and it's really a way to meet a lot of different learners in a lot of different ways. So I highly, highly recommend closed captioning. So how many people
So Tara,
oh yeah. Yeah.
so when I was teaching ESL at a university level, one of the assignments for my listening class was they had to go in and they had to choose a TED Talk video. They had to do 2 a week. And I gave them limitations like it had to be at least 3.5 minutes long. I think that's their regulation too, but they could pick any topic they wanted. They had to listen to it and write up a little bit about it. And I showed them where the speed adjuster was so they could slow it down for them to listen over and over and over if they wanted. But I also showed them where closed captioning was. So, but because it was for listening specifically, I wanted them to try listening first and then the reading second. But they loved it. They were excited to be able to slow it down, speed it up, read it. So, and they got to choose. It was their choice what topic they wanted to listen to.
I love that with the speed and then both. That's a really great idea. Just wrote that down. Use TED Talks. So how many people use
I didn't have to make video.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's so great. So just with the show of hands, do people use Quizlet? Do we have a lot of people who are familiar with Quizlet?
Looks like it's about half and half.
Okay. So in using Quizlet, I have made a bunch of my own. Quizlet is basically used for online flashcards, but then each list of vocabulary terms with definitions that you have in Quizlet automatically generates a game, a spelling, a listening, the flashcards that they can print out, and a little test. So you can make your own. It's a free resource, but then there are also thousands of Quizlets that were made by other instructors that you can search. So I just went in and searched GED social studies, and I just wanted you to see what I found. So there are tons and tons of sets of flashcards. But in doing this presentation and really thinking about UDL a lot over, the last couple of months, I thought, the next time I make a list of flashcards, I need to include visuals. So if I type in GED social studies, there are a bunch of vocabulary lists. And when you click on one of these, it generates the flashcards and the quiz and all that. Okay. So we can see like, here are the flashcards. And then you click it. And you can go down here and make a little game and everything. But the lists that have visuals can make a big difference for a lot of our students. And to provide that opportunity, again, could help reach students that maybe this wouldn't have been so beneficial for them before. So you can see here, there's another list that she provided visuals. And so challenging ourselves to go take that extra step to be able to represent that material in so many different ways can be really important for our students. So the ever faithful KWL can
Tara,
be. Go ahead.
Tara, can I add something from the chat? Karen said that many students use Quizlet, so maybe they are taking some lists and creating their own.
Yes, absolutely. And students themselves can access Quizlet. So I've used it with my students where I have them go in and access the list I've created, but then I also tell them, you guys can go on here and just go to Quizlet.com and go in the search and type in GED social studies as well. So that's something to think about too. So even if you're using it as a teaching tool that way, and you're not taking them directly to your list, you could show them that there are different options, and some of them include visuals and some of them not. So start to learn about yourself as a learner, you know, and if you are doing better with choosing ones with visuals, definitely urge them to do so. So our ever faithful KWL can work to represent material in many different ways too, and make connections. So what do you already know about the material? What do you want to know about the material? And what have you learned? We can have a visual, a chart, you can talk about it. And obviously the students can use the chart to manipulate themselves. It seems like a lot of people in this next point are doing really great already with using chats and polling. I've done quite a few trainings with Burlington English over the last month, and a lot of the trainers, shout out to them, have done an awesome job with using polling. So Zoom has some really great features in the settings. Before you start the meeting, you can set up different polls. You can do the polls along the way. Blackboard Collaborate has some really great options for polling. So using clear interactive tools, always being flexible. Oops. Oh no, that's not what I meant to do. Sorry. There we go. Let's see, is my closed captioning still on? Yes, okay, sorry about that. Using those clear interactive tools for students, sometimes having a little bit of routine, finding clear interactive tools that work for your class and the level that you're teaching and the subject that you're teaching. So for example, I found that Kahoot has worked really well for teaching virtually for many of my classes. But then for one of my classes, I used a different tool that's like that. So it's called socreative.com, and it's very similar to Kahoot. It's just without the jingles and the shapes and everything. It's just a little bit more academic looking, and it just worked for one of my classes a little bit better. But one thing I could do is use them both, you know, for the same material. So things to think about, having some routine, but also having some flexibility to reach our students and represent our material in the best ways possible is what we should be looking to do. So organizing, I kind of talked about this for a minute with Burlington English. They have really stepped up and created a great calendar that can blast out reminders. And then we can also double that up with whatever system we're using to communicate with our students. Google Classroom could connect to a Google Voice, or if we're using like a Weebly or an LMS, you know, we can have students turn on their notifications and show them how to do that. So staying organized with our concepts and with our classwork is really beneficial to our students. So I'm always looking for new ways to try to do that. Consistency and flexibility. All right, so action and expression. So we need to look for different ways, varied ways of communication and expression. So I've really found that offering one-on-one options with students has been really helpful. Some are less likely to reach out to me to be asking for those individual meetings. But one suggestion that I had come upon that I'm trying is to just say that I'm going to meet with students individually over the first couple of weeks, just to talk with them, to get them comfortable with having a Zoom with me individually, or whatever way you're communicating. If you're doing that through your learning management system, can be really beneficial for those students. Sometimes just doing something for the first time, as we all know, will kind of get us over that hump, but it also helps you to kind of build that trust and connection with your students. Something else I'm considering is grouping. So little side note, I'm in this book club, and one of the individuals in my book club is this really neat young woman who is in her residency in Peoria, and her passion is to work in prenatal emergency care. And so one thing that's really taking off in terms of working for equity in healthcare in her field is to do this group kind of cohort care with new mothers. So they start in their, when, you know, as soon as they can in their pregnancy, and they go to different classes together, and then they come, and of course when they're seeing the doctor, they go to different rooms. It makes me think a little bit about Call the Midwife. If you don't know that show, you should. But and so she said it's really groundbreaking, and it's helped a lot of individuals. Sometimes the mothers feel more comfortable coming in small groups, and then they're able to work with different. So it reminds me a little bit of EBRI for people who have trained with EBRI. But if we also think about it in terms of just straight communication with our students, kind of check-ins, whether the theme be technology for the week or a skill that we're working on, we could do it for differentiation. It's definitely possible with virtual learning, and something that I'm going to look into and try to see if I can kind of transfer that to coursework and reach more students if possible. So, yeah. Assistive technology. So I think in my last session, ReadWorks came up, but I know a lot of people use ReadWorks. We've talked about a lot of different platforms that people use, but clicking that audio on, you know, anytime you can offer students the option to have the audio as they're reading, it's really important. Another resource that I've used a lot over the years is VOA News, Learning English. And every article, it's current events, every article that they have, students can read along, change the speed, the volume, everything like that. So that's something to think about. And we talked about closed captioning. So always modeling for students. It's something, especially as we kind of leave students to kind of finish work for the week, you know, we might be coming to the end of a meeting with our students and trying to look to make sure people are still engaged, but really modeling expectations for them at some point is so important, and something, not that it can be easily lost, but at the same time, we are trying to fit in sometimes our classes and keep people engaged online, but to not forget that modeling is really important. And then of course, whatever institution that you're at, checking out what tutoring is still available for students is good to know. We should always be in touch with our resources the best that we can. So if that's something that you can do for your students, that'd be great. So feedback that is unique. We talked about Google Voice. And then on this note, I challenged myself this week. So if you use Blackboard, or Canvas has it too, in one of my classes that I teach, I'm used to going into Blackboard and going in my grade book, and I type my comments for their assignment for the week and submit it. There is an option to give video feedback. So there's a little button in most, it depends on the version of Blackboard that you have, but I think most are using the version. There's a little toolbox there, and you click on it and you can record a video and it embeds it in the feedback. So I did that prior to this presentation just because I wanted some, and I didn't tell the student that, you know, that's why I was doing it, but I said afterwards, hey, can you give me some honest feedback about getting that video versus, you know, my normal typing? And he said, honestly, it was great. He asked me about how, you know, I had done that. And also he said, it's just a nice personal touch to mix in every once in a while, especially with a class. That class is asynchronous online for the most part. So he said it just kind of adds that personal touch, and you were able to still communicate. You know, he said, I would think taking a step back as the instructor, you maybe had to prepare a little bit more. And I did, but that's okay. You know, I just thought it was really worth it. And so I'm going to challenge myself to mix that in and make those recordings as much as I can. So. All right, our next slide, I called Reaching All Types of Learners. And for this one, I just said back to basics because we're just categorizing this next slide as the visual, audio, and kinesthetic learning styles. And so I wanted to, again, open it up to the group to kind of talk about some pros and cons of teaching virtually through a lens of equity in each of these different learning styles. So some pros, some cons, some tips, some concerns. So let's start with visual. I have some notes, but I'm interested to hear what other people have to say for this as well. Does anyone have any ideas for our visual learners? Something I thought of was planning for, I think
My
that,
hula is moving slowly and I'm waiting to catch up with chat.
okay, that's okay. When you do, just feel free to interject. But some ideas that I wrote down, are we providing more visuals or less visuals? And that's really something to think about. I think to bring that quantitative aspect to it could really help us to think about, okay, typically when I teach a lesson like this, what kind of visuals do I have? Making sure, again, to pull our students, you know, do you know what I'm speaking of? Sometimes we can tell, we can see their faces in the classroom, that kind of like, what word was that? Let me pull it up on Google Image. But in here, you know, of course, we're always encouraging everyone to turn on their cameras, but if we can't see that, stopping to pull, do we need a visual? Are you familiar with that term? So that's something to think about. I think a con is that, well, it could be a pro or con. I find myself planning my visuals a little bit more when I'm teaching virtually. So I think in that way, I maybe have some ideas already in mind. But again, if it's not exactly what the students need to kind of get that concept across, sometimes I find myself, oh, okay, I need to take a step back, little break, maybe do the breakout room sooner than I thought so I can find a different visual to help students. And then of course also, if it's something I want the students to use with their assignment, sometimes there's a challenge with, you know, it didn't load or, you know, something like that. Just making sure to use the most easily accessible. I love Google, but I don't understand why sometimes the permissions turn on and off. How come sometimes people have to, you know, so I found myself really kind of being very intentional about how I'm posting visuals, which isn't always bad, but it's just something to think about from both our perspective and the student perspective, of course. Any thoughts that came in that we should note?
So Rebecca said that Brightspace D2L also allows video feedback. And Brett commented that all students get a close-up view of the content. Not sure what that's exactly about. Maybe in reference to Brightspace, not sure.
Yeah, or even to teaching virtually, you know, that could be a pro, teaching virtually, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, Tara, if I could just mention, so when I started first grade, I needed glasses. I didn't know that I needed glasses. So, and all my life, I've needed corrective vision. So I'm that person who, if I don't sit up front, I don't see. So I do think that's one of the advantages to virtual learning is that I always get a front row seat and I can decide how close or far away I am. I can decide to make the font larger. I can decide, you know, all those kinds of things. And now, you know, as my eyes are aging, it's just good. It's very nice to have that option. There are a lot of options, and I think empowering our students to have those options is key. To use those options, I should say, to know what they are and then to use them.
Absolutely, that's a really good point. You know, and along those lines, when we get to know our students at the beginning, you know, if that is something that they're dealing with, you know, hopefully they also know the tools if they need something bigger on their screen, but that might be nice to put on some kind of like entrance survey or something like, You know, do you know your accessibility features on your computer, you know, or do you need help with that? And, you know, yeah, great, really great. For our audio learners, some pros, some cons, some tips, some things to think about. This can be a pro or a con. Something that I came across and was thinking about is the quiet time. You know, I put this on here. You know, is there less quiet time? This really depends on your course, and that's really something to think about. Even when I gave the quiet time in this presentation, to look at that chart, it goes back to the, you know, quintessential, like, ooh, silence. What, is this okay? I'm supposed to be presenting, you know, but if you're teaching reading, sometimes having that quiet time to sit with the reading or a timed reading or whatever it is, you know, we may need to try to find time, a little more time to do that virtually in your class, but it depends on the class and your students. And reading aloud. Sometimes, I don't know if I had thought about it before I was putting this together, but I think that online, you know, when we're teaching virtually, I'm really thinking about, you know, the day and how to keep students engaged. And at the same time, though, has reading aloud gone to the wayside? And should I think about doing that a little bit more? Any other thoughts for audio learners?
Karen just said this is an awesome presentation and it really opens the door to improving connection with students, making use of a variety of teaching learning styles and online learning, personalizing the virtual classroom, etc. So sounds like she's just saying, woohoo, thank you very much.
Thank you. And I know we're coming to the end. We're on our last point here. And I want to give a shout out to Anita Kerr on this one, the kinesthetic learners. What I did a training with her for standards, a couple of them, you know, and the last one that I did, I thought she did an awesome job of saying, okay, here's the next activity. We're going to watch the video. Just like she said in her presentation, she had given us some questions to think about as we were watching the video. The video was 15 minutes and she said, I'm going to turn my camera off. Please watch the video, but we're going to come back in 25 minutes. So you have time to digest it, to rewind it, to get up and walk around, get a drink, use the restroom. And I thought that was a really great thing to think about, especially for those of us who may be teaching some classes that are a little bit longer. I think that could be really beneficial, you know, especially as we kind of get in the groove of our classrooms, to really kind of bring in that kinesthetic aspect, which can be hard to capture. And it might not necessarily be working with the material, but a lot of times people just need that movement. And so I thought she did a great job with that. So that's one example I thought of for a break that could, you know, involve some of that.
Along those same lines, Mary Beth said, in an ELA classroom, quiet time is important to allow students time to process what is being taught.
I completely agree. And I really think that I'll be a little bit more thoughtful and intentional about quiet time in class, you know, and even as my kids get older, I've noticed that when we go over concepts, whether it has to do with school or not, I found myself saying lately, do you need a minute to digest that? And a lot of times their answer is yes, you know, and so they need some quiet time to be able to do that. So I think, you know, it's a challenge and it might be a little bit uncomfortable for a second, you know, but it might be something really important for our students. So, other thoughts, comments, questions?
You know, Tara, when you mentioned about that it's uncomfortable, and I know it is whenever you like, especially as you're virtual and just not talking for a bit, but I think helping students to understand that it is part of the learning process and that it is valuable and that they need time. I think empowering them with that knowledge is important. And one of the things that we can do, I was just thinking as you were talking about the providing time is, as Anita did with your training, is maybe even just say, okay, let's turn it off for 5 minutes. And, so there's no expectation of anybody talking there. The expectation is we're all going to process for 5 minutes and think about it.
Yes, that's a really great idea, especially when you have, what was the game I was doing online? And I said, no, don't say anything for 30 seconds. Wait till my timer goes off. I have my timer right here, and of course, oh, we were doing some of the CASAS practice, I remember, on Burlington English, so I was just showing a couple questions. We were starting it as a class. And of course, sometimes they just can't help it. And they're like, B, but if you mute it, that's a really good idea. That is just not a thing, like, please don't unmute for a couple minutes. And when I turn it back on or turn it off, that's a good idea. Other thoughts, comments, questions? Okay, so again, I know we're nearing the end and we have just a couple of things to say for the forum and such, but again, my email was on that first slide and I know you can find it easily through the Whova app, but I'm Tara Schwab. Feel free to reach out. I loved what someone said in one of the first presentations I was in this morning, that find people to talk to, to bounce ideas off of. It's important for all of us, to be seeing what different people are doing and sharing our material. So feel free to reach out.
So one of the other comments that Karen made was students can dance, exercise, move as they are listening, and that can help them retain. So if there are those students, if they get up and move, good for them. If they need to sit and be quiet, good for them.
Really good point. And we should tell them that. I'm going to write that down too. Tell them, I hope you dance. I should play that the first day.
Yeah, so Tara, there's some thanks coming in for the ideas that you're using. And I just love how you're embracing this. We're going to call it an opportunity. I mean, we all didn't choose this, but it is making us rethink how we provide educational experiences for our learners. So thank you very much for doing that. And thank you for bringing up the couple of slides that I have at the end here from the Forum for Excellence Planning Committee. We want to thank you for your attendance as well as Tara's presenting, and be sure to complete the end of session evaluation. If you'll go to the next slide, Tara, that's what it looks like. You guys are all getting to be old hat. You've been like in the Forum for Excellence virtually all day, so you know now where to go and rate that session. And you also know that you want to follow us on social media and post. And the next slide will show you some information about that you can engage us in Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you'll move on to one more, I will mention also tonight, you guys, we have trivia that is sponsored by one of our wonderful vendors. So join us. There's still seats left in trivia, but you do need to sign up. It's free, it's easy, and it's going to be family friendly. So they're going to make sure that if you've got kids around or somebody sitting on your lap, it'll all be fun, not necessarily kid focused, but definitely family friendly. So in the photo mosaic wall, it's not too late to share pictures of you and your colleagues, show pictures of maybe you working at home or watching the Forum for Excellence from home. I took a picture of a fun sign that's outside my office that basically tells people nicely to be quiet. So share all of those pictures, and tomorrow we will display the photo mosaic wall for the Forum for Excellence. And we have one more thing to do today, and that is on the last slide to thank our vendors. Thank you very much for all of our sponsors who've helped us bring you the Forum for Excellence virtually this year. So all of you have a wonderful evening. Be well. Hope to see you at trivia tonight. I will say that Bevan Gibson believes that she will win. So if anybody wants to get in there and beat her, that is an admirable goal that you probably should, should think about moving towards. But otherwise, thank you all for attending.
Thank you.